Welcome back to another video lecture, Mr. King's U.S. History class. This time we're going to turn our attention from the horrors of World War I into America's frustrated attempts to produce an idealistic peace at the Paris Peace Conference, or what most people and most students and American people call the Treaty of Versailles. And if you remember, that treaty was not adopted and not ratified by the Republican-led Senate. So Democratic President Wilson, who had taken the United States to war with the hopes of ending all wars and promoting democracy, self-determination, and creating what was known as the League of Nations to promote, protect, and defend international peace through collective security, well, the United States was not going to be a partner in that endeavor. And there are serious consequences that resulted from that. We'll see those consequences play out in the 1930s. But for now, we want to take a look at the 1920s, a brief look nonetheless. And this is a rather interesting time period, and I think a significant time period in which the United States really kind of has a basic debate. Does the United States want to be a traditional Bible-based, Christian-based nation following the practices of the 1800s, that is the 19th century, where, daddy dominated, mommy stayed home, fulfilled her domestic duties? Or does the United States want to open itself up to new ideas, new innovations, new techniques, etc. So this is going to be a rather interesting debate, and one might say, and again, this is something we want to look at, does this debate still go on today as we live in an ever-changing world in the 21st century, as times and technology rapidly change almost before our eyes, so that some people like the comfort and security of the past, others embrace change and the future. So for today, what I'd like you guys to be able to do is really, I think, capture 5 things, maybe more, but at least 5 things that you learned about the 1920s. And those are big ideas. And certainly you can use some of the specific examples as supporting details. But then, and more importantly, are these 5 things or more relevant? In what ways do they teach us, inform us, or instruct us? That really is the goal, so that history isn't just simply boring facts that we need to learn to pass a test, but history might be a way that we can, again, think about who we are, where we've come from, and maybe how to live more humanely. That idea I've been trying to offer up all year long, that history helps us become and live more humanely. So let's get started then. You're looking for 5 big things and whether these are relevant, and we can talk about that in class. But let's get started here using a new format today in Prezi. The introduction. This picture, I think, captures, in some regards, one aspect of the 1920s, and that is the new aspect, looking towards the future. There's a woman dressed in a scanty dress, for at least the times. Wouldn't be shocking today at all. You see some musicians in the background playing jazz, the actual art form itself. You can see geometric shapes and patterns, and that was something that was new as well in the world of art. This was created by John Held, and it was on the cover of McClure's magazine in August 1927. And McClure's was a very popular magazine that talked about people. So it's similar to People magazine today, actually. So, and that right there is probably one of the main ideas. One of the ideas is the 1920s represented something new, something different, a break from the past. But at any rate, let's get into the 1920s. The 1920s was in many ways an age of contradictions that witnessed the forces of modernity and change coming into conflict with the tried and true traditions of the past. Now, every age, every decade contains its own contradictions, but those of the 1920s seem to stand out in bolder and sharper form than in other decades. We go back to the end of the 19-teens and we look at how World War I really catapulted the United States to a position of economic and financial dominance and power in the world. However, American citizens, and in particular their political leaders, especially the Republicans who now controlled Congress and the White House, they won the 1920 presidential elections. These Republicans adopted strict isolationist policies and turned the United States inward, focusing on domestic concerns, primarily business and the idea of making money, something that we associate with the 1920s, sort of a golden age of capitalism. Kind of takes us back to the end of the 19th century when the large capitalist elites, called robber barons according to some, dominated U.S. society. We're going to see that come back in the 1920s, though with some changes. Let's take a look at some of the issues and that followed World War I and the beginnings of the decade. So the war is over. The United States helps win the war. You would think that people would be happy, excited, enthusiastic. However, economic problems always follow wars, and those that followed World War I were actually very severe in the United States. There were massive labor strikes. There were terrorist bombings by different groups, anarchists who wanted to overthrow or undermine confidence in the government. There was a lot of paranoia, and that's what you see in these political cartoons about immigrants and in particular about communists. Remember that in 1917, Russia had gone over to the communists as a result of the 1917 Bolshevik Revolution. And the idea of the Bolsheviks and communism in general was to spread its ideas across the globe, joining all working class folks together, opposed to capitalist and robber barons, if you will, again, to use that term. And so there was a lot of fear that socialist communist ideas would actually spring up in the United States. And remember, there were a lot of immigrants who had come from areas of the Russian Empire and that had experience or exposure to socialistic ideas and teachings. So there was a great deal of fear that led to swift and rapid reactions. In 1919, the Attorney General, a man by the name of Palmer, launched a series of raids in which he rounded up suspected communists, put them on a boat, and sent them over to communist Russia. The other thing that the Congress did and the president supported was restricting immigration. Immigrants were viewed with a great deal of suspicion. The economy was bad. Americans and American soldiers returning from the war needed jobs. So why are we going to allow immigrants to take those jobs? The idea was cut off the flow of immigration. This will be good for American workers and for the American economy. And in 1921, there was the Johnson Act, and in 1924, there was the National Origins Act. And the number of immigrants literally, and you can see this in this cartoon, slowed to a trickle. And you can see this big funnel with Uncle Sam kind of restricting the number of immigrants getting through at the other end. And this was going to then really sum up the idea of America returning to its American ideas, the Americanism, if you will, focusing on Americans and in particular white Protestant Americans. So we're going to reintroduce this idea of race and sort of ethnic, if you will, purity, if you can even talk about that in the United States, because we're a nation of immigrants. So there's a lot of kind of goofy hypocrisy going on here. But at any rate, that was the situation in 1920, 1921, 22, and 23. Now let's turn our attention to some other issues. In response to the presence of large numbers of African Americans that had moved north during the war to occupy positions in factories, we can see that there was a response to African Americans living in northern cities. There's a statistic that I think really captures that. In New York City, the largest city in the United States, 1 in 70 residents was African American prior to 1900. Let me repeat that. 1 in 70 African American prior to 1900. By about the 1920s, that number was now 1 in 9 African Americans living in New York City. So there's a huge expansion in the numbers of African Americans living in New York City, and that was true of other northern cities. With that, there were, on one hand, new cultural forms and forms of expression, especially jazz music, that dominated city life and captivated the minds and audiences of white people who went to listen to black musicians. In addition to jazz music, there's also blues music. So African Americans are taking advantage of their opportunities in cities to create new forms of entertainment and culture, adding substantially to the richness of America and its society. However, I think you can see clearly on the screen this poster, this shot of a KKK march in Washington, 1925. There was a white response to the African American presence in northern cities and their culture. A man named William J. Simmons, who was a Georgia-based evangelist preacher, really founded the new Ku Klux Klan. The Ku Klux Klan existed in the Reconstruction period right after the Civil War, but the efforts of the United States government really put the Klan to rest. That is, the Union forces really went after the Klan in the 1870s and really kind of shut it down. And it really didn't do a whole lot, but it comes back in this time period, really in 1915 and on. William J. Simmons creates a large Klan movement in different states around the South and also in the North. There's a large Klan presence in Indiana, of all places, right? And even in parts of Ohio, western Pennsylvania. So the idea of the Klan, at least this new Klan, was that the racial integration of African Americans in the North and also immigrants coming into the United States was undermining the pure white American society. And you have to remember that the Klan's idea, and the modern Klan's idea, was, hey, who created America? God. And who did God create America for? Well, the answer is clear: white Protestant Americans. So the idea that African Americans were now living in northern cities, working in factories, and producing culture that really added to American society alarmed white people to the point where they were willing to join these organizations, or at least tacitly support them, saying, look, God made America for white Protestants. There's just simply no room for these other folks. And so this racial card really comes roaring back in the 1920s and really shouldn't be overlooked, because it sets up, again, this tension. Is America going to be a tolerant, inclusive society, or is America going to continue to preserve more traditional racial ideas about white supremacy and African American inferiority? A discussion that's going to continue throughout the 1920s and into the 21st century. Well, African Americans responded with movements of their own. A man by the name of Marcus Garvey formed the Universal Negro Improvement Association, the Universal Negro Improvement Association. And Garvey's idea was really that, hey, look, we understand what's going on in America. And simply put, African Americans have to separate themselves from white people and live in African American enclaves in the cities and live together, produce culture, and stay together to protect the African American identity. So Marcus Garvey really goes against W.E.B. Du Bois's idea that African Americans had to challenge racism and challenge separate but equal. And again, we see that even the African American community is going to be divided on this question about how to live in American society in the 20th century. Garvey's movement was quite popular, and you're going to see Garvey's movement kind of come back in the 1960s with the Black Power movement, the Black Panthers, and the black leader Malcolm X, in contrast to Martin Luther King. So that's one thing. Let's take a look quickly now at the other slide here, and that is women. We can see that women are going to emerge from their cocoon of their house. They occupied, to a certain extent, jobs during World War I, but moreover, they're going to take advantage of the 19th Amendment that allowed them to vote, and they're going to take advantage of the new cities and the new opportunities in cities to engage in different types of activity. Women begin to wear short skirts. They cut their hair short, they smoke cigarettes, and they enjoy social life outside the home, going to dance halls, going to clubs, going to speakeasies. Remember, this is a time of prohibition where alcohol, the sale and production of alcohol is banned, yet there is plenty of alcohol to be had in America. And women are going to find these clubs called speakeasies that were in the homes of people and in dance clubs, and they're going to enjoy this new style of life that was going to challenge the old traditional values values. So that's where we're going to end for today. Hopefully you got a couple things, and we'll pick up later.